want to go ahead and ask, first of all, as a artist, how did you even come into art?
I've been drawing since I was a kid. I'm one of those people who never changed what they wanted to do. I didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to be an athlete or anything. Ever since I was in like 3rd grade, I remember telling people I'm just going to do art and be an artist. And the problem with that is if it doesn't work out, you haven't left yourself another option. So I kind of had to make it work. But I grew up during the age of like the biggest comic strips. I was really into newspaper comic strips. Calvin and Hobbes, The Far Side, Bloom County. They were all like really popular right when I was, when I was reading. Comic book artists could be superstars in my mind. So I researched and read about comics and cartoons, and I actually spent many, many years working on my ideas for comic strips, always thinking I'd work in newspapers. Well, eventually, newspapers were kind of going away, and that didn't work out. And as I got older, I got interested in comic books. So then I was going to be a comic book artist. And so it changed over the years with different things and different interests. I worked on sequential art, I worked on concept art, then I became, I learned about graphic design because I wanted to make sure that, in between trying to do any other things, I could get work, and graphic designers are always in need. And so I've kind of just done art ever since I was young, knowing that's what I was going to do. And just working along to make it work. But I never, as a kid, I never said, oh, I'm going to draw giant chalk drawings. I had no idea. This didn't happen until the first one I ever did was in 2004, the first chalk drawing ever. And the first convention I got to do was 2 years later in the summer of 2006. So I'd been doing art since I was a kid in the 70s and the early 80s and all that. I didn't fall into chalk art until, the mid to late 2000s. So you never know where your art journey is going to lead you. You kind of do a bunch of different things, but eventually you fall into certain things that take you where you didn't expect to go. And this was one of those things. I mean, thanks to this, I've done chalk pieces for Lucasfilm. I've done chalk pieces for Nintendo, ESPN, Marvel and DC Comics, every anime company you can name, Viz Media. I've done pieces for 2K Games and Crunchyroll and Funimation. So something I never knew that I would ever be interested in ended up being something that's kind of taken my career the farthest so far. It's an interesting journey. You never know, what's going to take you somewhere.
Before I even get to the part, I want to ask, how did you get into it? But where did you grow up at?
I'm from upstate New York.
You're upstate New York?
Yeah, so I grew up, it's about an hour south of Syracuse. Kind of in the whole, not the big city New York that you see, but like the countryside, the farmlands, the rolling hills, the beautiful nature. I mean, that was my New York. So I never even went to New York City until I was in high school, and my art club went down for an art trip. They're about 3 hours from me. I just never went. So it was something that I grew up in this area that I loved. Upstate New York, I loved the kind of New England feel, and all that. And so fortunately, I wasn't far from the city. So when I started doing things, the city was a close journey to get to. Washington, D.C. is only about 5 hours from me. Boston's about 5 hours from me. So there's a lot of major cities that I can get to in a not too long period of time where I don't have to fly or anything like that. So I ended up, I can do a lot of, and I started doing a lot of the chalk stuff all over, New England and stuff like that. Conventions in Baltimore, conventions in D.C., conventions in New York, conventions in Philly. Philly's like 3 hours from me. So I had a nice, even though my town itself is tiny and has nothing there, it was a nice hub to be near many things. So it helped when I started doing stuff like this for travel to be in that kind of location.
So you're a country boy? Or no?
More like a suburb boy. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs, but 5-minute drive from my house, there's farmland, and there's hills and mountains and all that. So I was never a big city person, not growing up.
So you became, or you knew this is what you wanted to do. Did you have any flack from your parents whatsoever, or grandparents, any of your family?
No, my parents supported what I did. I think because one of the reasons they did is because my dad was into art. He never did anything with it, but he liked to draw. My brother Steve, my brother Scott, all of them, like my family, all kind of drew a little bit. They all showed interest at times.
How many
None of them
siblings
did
do you
anything.
have?
Huh?
How many siblings do you have?
2 brothers, 1 sister. So we had, 2 parents and 4 kids. I was the youngest.
Okay.
So by the time they got to me, I think when I showed interest in art, they were just thinking, it's an art person who will kind of be interested in art, but won't do anything with it. But I ended up, showing, I think, a natural ability very early on. I think once they saw the natural ability early on, they decided, well, this is worth supporting, encouraging, seeing where he goes. And I was smart about it. Like I said, I never said this is my only option to be an illustrator or a cartoonist. I immediately started learning graphic design and computers, so I had options. I wanted to be able to do, have options for work, so I could be doing that and doing art on the side and stuff. So I think that is kind of why they supported me as much as they did, because I was tenacious about it. I showed very quickly that I wasn't kidding. It was something I really wanted to do,
So
and it's kind of been my life.
When you're doing art like this, where's your mind at?
It's funny. Big pieces like this are very meditative. Early on, I'm very stressed. I have a lot I'm trying to get done. I'm trying to focus. I'm trying to, I'm messing with colors. I'm trying to figure out layering of colors because it's different for every piece. I have a lot of trial and error early on. But once I get to a certain point where it starts flowing, I know I have my color palette that I've kind of narrowed down. It becomes very meditative. Time starts passing without me being aware of it. You get into this zone of, it's probably the same zone athletes get into when they're really, in the zone. And artists, I think a lot of different people, writers and stuff like that, all have that place they go to where your mind kind of just starts taking, it's not conscious anymore. You're
Autonomous.
It's almost autonomous. There's an innate artistic place where you're getting to, your brain gets very, I'd love to see what my brain waves get like while I'm drawing, because I have a feeling they fall into a very meditative place, and to me it becomes very relaxing after a while. I don't feel the pain, I don't feel the backache, I don't feel my fingers hurting, and almost every time
you're literally one with your art.
Oh yeah, my fingers will bleed every show. It just happens after doing 30 hours of abrasion, on the ground. So it's you kind of have to be able to fall in that place to turn off the aches, the pains, the worry, the time, the stress, the crowd, everyone around you, and eventually you just get to a point where you're like, I'm just creating, and it becomes very pure.
Okay. What makes this? You said in the beginning it's the stressful part of it, but it's kind of like a combined question. What is the most aggravating part of doing this, and what is the toughest piece of art that you ever had to do?
Well, the most aggravating part is the material, is the medium itself. Chalk, it's like wrangling cats. It doesn't do necessarily what you want it to do. It's very messy. It gets all over. It smudges everywhere. It's a very difficult medium to corral, but it does some amazing things almost on its own when you learn, when you get the feel for it, when you can kind of feel the texture of the different chalks, the grit, the blending. It loves to blend. It loves to join colors and create amazing shading and light sources and all that. So you have to get past that part where it's stressful and difficult and not staying within the lines and dust getting everywhere. Because eventually you work that down, you work it down. It's almost like sculpting. You layer, you edge, you clean up, you reapply. And then sooner or later I can see it hit. I get to a point where I can see the densities where I want it to be. I can feel the blending is just how I want it to be.
It's like a digital artist that knows hex code.
Yeah. You know the color you want. It's
Yeah.
like I can pick that one out now. So it's eventually you get to that part, and once you're there, then the chalk's a joy to work with because it creates, like I said, there's tons of little lighting things and reflective things and glows and shadows, but I don't necessarily have to consciously do. They almost kind of happen when you're blending the right colors, when you're doing the right shading. And I love that part. Once I get there,
it's kind of like a stream. It just all flows. It's like
exactly.
It just flows.
Yeah. And it kind of has to, because if you're consciously thinking your way through 30 hours of work, that's tough on the mind. You've got to be able to get to a place where the time doesn't matter anymore. Because 30 hours of doing anything, I don't care if you love it or not, it's gonna wear on you.
So no breaks in between? Or how often do you take a break?
During the day, I don't really break. I'll kind of work 8-9 hours. I might run to the bathroom. I might take a drink. That's about it. I don't stop for a long period of time. I do have to end when the show floor closes, because they close the doors and people have to leave. So, because I have to have this done in a certain amount of time, I can't really take too many breaks, because I'm like, well, I got to keep going. I got to be done by the time, tomorrow comes. So, once you accept that fact, the fact that you're just sitting and hanging out for so long, it's not a big deal. The most difficult piece I've ever worked on, I think you asked?
Yes.
There's a few, and they're for different reasons. Some were difficult because of color. Just trying to achieve the density of the colors they chose for the original piece. Some were difficult because of number of characters. I did a piece for Funimation, for Soul Eater, the anime Soul Eater, that had, I think, 13 characters in it. It's actually over there, so you can get a picture of it and you can see. That one took, I think, 36 hours. That was a long one. And it was very bright, colorful, and vibrant. It had a lot of shading, had a lot of color gradients that had to be consistent across large areas. I've done others that have had very specific perspective. And perspective at this scale is very difficult to get right. If you're off just a little bit, it really shows. So you have to really work at figuring out where the perspective lines are supposed to be, things like that. Others I've done that have a lot of text. Text is one of the most difficult things to do in chalk. It's very hard to edge the letters, to keep them looking smooth. It's very time consuming. So I've done something like that. Even this Star Wars piece right in front of you with the number of characters and number of colors, that was another 36-hour piece. Unfortunately, I had 4 days to do that one. So it wasn't a 3-day convention. I actually had 4 days, which allowed me to loosen up a bit more and I had time. So,
That's so cool.
and there's the stresses of when, like when I did the piece for Lucasfilm, George Lucas was there and stopped by while I was working. When you have something like that happen, you have a lot of stress because you're like, am I doing it well enough? Does he approve? I've recreated artwork from different artists. You know Alex Ross, the painter who paints comic books? Mm-hmm. I've done several pieces of his, and I did one at a convention he was at. So he came by and watched me work, and it's like I'm recreating his piece large, so it's stressful.
So when you get to a point where you have seen that your love for what you do gets you to a point where you meet all these different types of people and you get to be involved in so many different companies, when do you take a look in the mirror and say, when did I get here?
I've already done that many times. Believe me, there's been a couple of moments in my life that were amazing. Meeting George Lucas was one. Another was I actually got to sit and have breakfast with Stan Lee. I didn't just meet him for like a few minutes. I sat with him for like 20 minutes while he had breakfast. It was just me, him, and his assistant. And he was looking at all my chalk art through my portfolio and stuff. It just worked out that way. At a San Diego Comic-Con one year I was working. So it's like, I've been very lucky in a lot of ways to meet artists I love, to meet filmmakers and creatives I love. And, I already am amazed at what I've been able to do and what I've been able to experience. But at the same point, imposter syndrome is real. To this day, I will look at other artists' work, even here in this artist alley. I will look at their work and be like, damn, I'm never going to be that good. I don't know how they do that. That's absolutely incredible. So, and then I think, geez, what kind of artist am I? Just blending with chalk. And, it happens. Everybody experiences it. And no one is immune. No matter how far along you are, you're going to have days where you look at yourself and you go, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be doing this.
So that's when you have to really learn how to love yourself.
Absolutely, and it's very difficult. And as artists, we all know we are our own worst critics. We will see one thing we did wrong, and everyone else will see the 100 things right, and we can't forget that one thing. That's the one thing that matters to us. We don't care about all the rest. So, I can have people sit here and tell me they think this is amazing, or it's incredible, or, they love my work, and I appreciate it. And it means a lot to me. But then I can take a look at a piece, even this one, see something I don't like, and be like, yeah, I did that horribly, you know, and that part is awful. What if everyone actually sees that and they're just not saying anything? You know, you go through it, just like everybody goes through it. So that's no reason to give up. Knowing that everybody goes through imposter syndrome is to me very comforting. When I finally accepted that and began to realize that nobody truly loves what they do, they all are their own critics who will tear their own stuff down in a heartbeat if they don't think they lived up to their potential. Well, then I realized I'm like everybody else, and that's okay. That's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get there, you know, I'll still have imposter syndrome happen, but it's easier to get out of.
What would you say is the most? Well, I'll get to that one later. What piece do you feel that you said I made it?
There was one I did, and the picture I have of it, I don't even think I put it out. I did a piece for New York Comic Con in 2008, and it was an Alex Ross recreation when Captain America had died, and Bucky took over Captain America, and they redesigned the suit to be kind of very metallic looking and stuff, and he had done a redesign. They asked me to do a chalk art of that, this big, with just the head.
I love that.
Just the head and face. With all the reflections and all the glares and all that. When I finished that one and looked at it, and then I saw a picture from up high. I had some people were coming by in like one of those cherry lifters at the end of the show, and I handed my camera and said, "Could you just take a picture of it for me, please? I want to get a top-down view." When I saw that picture, I'm like, that really looks exactly like it. You'd think it was a print of it. If I wasn't lying next to it for scale, you wouldn't know that it's chalk art. And when I did that piece, that's one of the few that I look back on to this day. I still look back and go, damn, that one to me was, I'm very happy and proud of that one. So,
it's like someone winning. It's like someone getting a check for $500,000.
Oh.
But then that's like first big check. But if they keep getting money like $2 million, $3 million, it's their first check is the one that hits the most emotion.
they will never forget it. They'll never
Yes.
forget how they felt, you know. So I've had even the Star Wars piece, like that piece right there. There's a time lapse of that I recorded while I made it. That's on the season 5 DVD of Clone Wars. It's a bonus feature on the DVD. I'm like, I'm on a Lucasfilm DVD. So, you know, there's times I think about that and I'm like, I can't believe that. That's incredible. I'm on a Star Wars DVD, you know, but I've been, like I said, I've been lucky enough to do these. I say lucky enough. I did 36 hours worth of work. They thought it was good enough to put on the DVD. So luck, or did I work hard? But I've been fortunate enough to have these things happen. And I appreciate all of them.
Did you ever have a desire to say, oh, I want to be able to do work for these companies or this particular company?
Yeah, there's always those, you know, golden eggs or whatever you want to call them, those treasured things you want to get to. There's still characters I've not recreated. There's art I'd love to create, both in anime and in comic book. And you know, I'd love to do a piece. I've done outdoor chalk art and stuff like that. I'd love to do one for one of the Marvel movie openings. I haven't been able to do that yet. That would be really cool. That I think would be really neat to do at the live. You know, get there about 2 days before the premiere, set up, do the piece, and then have it be done for the live premiere of the show, for the movie. That'd be awesome. But that's one of my things where I'm like, I hope someday I get to do that, but I never have had the chance. So it's you always have goals. I don't think anyone could ever say I've done everything I wanted to do, and if they do, deep down inside, there's something they're not telling people, because there's always things. There's so much to do out there. There's always things you still want to do.
Anybody that gets complacent is kind of like they haven't dug deep within themselves to know what they can possibly do. I feel like the one that you said was the most emotional is kind of like your favorite piece.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah, there's a couple. I mean, people ask multiple favorites, and they're favorites for different reasons. But that's the one I keep coming back to. That Alex Ross one of that at New York Comic Con. It was a huge show. You know, like 100,000 people. And The piece I thought turned out great. I was just so happy with it. It was still fairly early in my career. The first chalk convention I did was 2006, and I did that one, I think, in 2008. So, you know, it was still early on, and I'd done that piece. I'll never forget that piece.
I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up because I don't want to mess up the flow of things. I'm very thankful you gave me the opportunity to interview you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I love talking about art. You know, it's like I said, it's one of the things I enjoy the most about this process is the interactivity. People get to see, people get to ask questions, people get to, you know, there's no magic secret going on. I don't have a special key command in Photoshop that makes the art look a certain way. It's people watch me make it for 30 hours, and there's no secret behind it other than dedication to making a piece. And I think people appreciate that in this day and age when so much can be done, you know, other ways, and you never get to see the process. I think people appreciate it.
So this makes, you know, happiness comes from within yourself. Doing this is happiness, isn't it?
Oh yeah. It's stress, it's pain.
It's
but
all
it's
the
happy.
emotions and all is one.
Absolutely.
You got to put it all together. That's the life. That's the experience of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You don't want it easy. What's the point of even being here?
I know, exactly.
Because that's what gives you the story to even share it in the first place. Everybody's a unique book.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.